Hey boys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rick and thanks for joining. Today I wanted to share with you my awesome steel twister that I made for 30 bucks. So what we'll do is I'll give you a quick brief overview of this tool. We'll get into some twisting some steel, and then we'll finish up with the materials and the dimensions in case you want to build one yourself. So let's get started.
Okay, so this is the overall twisting tool. And the primary purpose of this tool is to twist cold steel, not hot steel, cold steel, including flat stock up to 1 inch wide by 3/16 inch thick. You can bend square bar stock like this up to 1/2 inch thick. Here's another example of, this is a 1/2 inch thick flat stock, 3/16 inch thick. Some of the uses of this is it's really ideal for making twisted pickets for steel gates or fencing, or it's ideal in creating steel spirals to incorporate into like decorative sculptures. So let's go through some of the main features. Here's the front clamp. Now the front clamp locks in the steel to be bent in all directions while allowing the piece to be rotated, creating that twist. It's heavy duty to hold the steel tightly and to withstand the high torque as you bend the steel. The back clamp here also locks in the steel to be twisted and be positioned, anywhere along the rail. It slides back and forth, and again, it can be slid across this rail depending on the length of stock you're working with and the length of twist that you want to create. So let's get started and twist some steel. Okay, there you go. This is 1/2 inch by 3/16 inch. Put a nice spiral in. Once this tool's set up, you can do multiples of these, make exactly the same thing with the same length of stock. To give you an example of what you could use one of these for, in addition to gates and fencing, if you're a brown thumb gardener, you can make a sculpture like this, right? That you could put into a nice flower pot. And so these are the scroll we bent in the last video I put out. And then you could put and sort of bend these spirals, right? Cut them off, and they sort of look like reeds. And then you could paint this up and weld a flat paint on it. And you got your bucket that you can put in the garden, and you bury it with some dirt. And there you have it. You got something that you don't have to water, and it won't die on you. We're brown thumbs here in the family, so I think this will go to good use. And there is a 1/2 inch bar with a beautiful twist to it. Beautiful. Okay guys, let's go through the materials and the dimensions. So let's talk about this front clamp. I'm using a 2-inch square stock by 6 inches long by 1/8 inch thick. If I was to do it over again, I probably would have used something a little bit beefier, maybe 3/16 inch thick. But for now, it's working. I use that. Now you'll see this is elevated off of the rail because you have to accommodate for your screws. right, that are going to swing around here for locking in. So it has to be raised up somewhat. If you use set screws, fine. You don't have to have it as high as I had it, but nevertheless, you got to have some clearance for these screws. So that's 2 inches by 6 inches. Down below here, you have another piece that is inch and a half, inch and a half square, and then that sits on the full rail, which is 4 feet long, also inch and a half square stock, and then just whatever you can use whatever you want as put some feet on there. Now, in terms of this, the inside of this clamping device, what I found that would fit nicely into this 2-inch square tube was a piece of black pipe, and that's 1.25 inch black pipe, and then I also slipped inside it a 1-inch piece of Schedule 40 black pipe, and then this together, when I welded the 1-inch tube to the 1.25 inch tube, that seemed to add a lot of strength, and it gave it some good wall thickness, at least 1/4 inch wall thickness. I thought as a minimum. You could make them even heavier, but so far so good. Then I tapped a half inch, drilled and tapped for 1/2 inch screws, which I think is critical. I tried 5/8, I then went to 3/8, and then eventually decided to go to 1/2 inch because neither of those screws I felt was hard enough, tough enough to handle all the torque. But as well as, I think you need a good thickness here to be able to hold the screw in place and again handle that torque. And you can see as this goes in, these work to help clamp the piece. The other piece of this front clamp is you've got to be able to prevent it from moving in this direction, right? And so I just welded on this piece of 1 inch by 3/16 onto the black pipe, and what that does is just help keep it. And given this 2-inch square, it butts up against it nicely and prevents this whole mechanism from being pulled in, because that's what the steel wants to do. It wants to eventually, as it's twisting, it wants to contract, and you want to prevent that. Otherwise, you'll end up with an odd-shaped looking spiral. And then finally, I wanted to put on the back of this a real heavy-duty, loop here that I could put anything in to rotate to make the rotation and the twist. I just happened to forge out a piece of 5/8 inch steel rod, flatten it out at the ends here so I could weld it onto this 1.25 inch pipe, and that's plenty. And the size, it's a little long, I understand, and maybe doesn't look as nice as it could, but boy, it sure is functional because I can put whatever I need. And then I happen to be using some 3/4 inch steel bar in here to help rotate this. It takes a lot of torque when you're bending steel, especially if you're bending 1/2 inch. This requires an awful lot of torque, this 1/2 inch square bar. So that's the front end of the clamp, and then once it comes in, put in your screws. I might decide to put 2 other screws on both sides here to add for further help, especially when this is fine the way it is for flat stock. I think for square stock, I think it would be better to have 2 other 1/2 inch bolts put in here, which I can do pretty easily to just add a little extra help in clamping down that square stock. That's the front end of the clamp. This piece, the back end clamp, first off, this piece here is 3 inch by 3.5 inch by 1/2 inch plate, and so that's the top plate. The bottom plate, all of these plates here, right here, this is 3/8 inch thick plate by I believe that's 2 inch. So 2 inch wide by 3/8 inch, and this overall length is 6 inches. Okay, so I have to have the base. I have to have a piece of 3/8 inch by 2 inch by about 5 inch, 5-6 inches, enough to be able to add height so that it'll line up. So when you clamp stock in here, it'll line up here. There's 3 weld points, so you've got the base welded, you've got the sides welded to this additional 1.5 inch square stock, and then you've got the top welded as well. So 3 points of weld that holds this together, but nevertheless allows it to slide along. Now, the only other thing I put in is I tapped 6 holes, 3 here and 3 on the other side, the ones in the bottom here, and these are 3/8 inch bolts, and this bottom one will affix this to the rail and keep it from sliding back and forth. These two work together with the other two on the other side to push these plates, these 3/8 inch pieces of plate together to clamp and hold whatever you're going to bend, flat stock or square, right? And by putting in this 1.5 inches down here, it matches the distance, because there's, if you can see, there's an 1.5 inch square here, 1.5 inch square here. So already we're almost at the height of the hole here, and so then you can adjust, where you position your stock within. The rail is, like I said, 4 feet long, and that'll accommodate twists, at least 36 inches. Most rails are about that height, somewhere in there, 36 inches high. So if you're making a picket within a rail, this will certainly accommodate that. I can't stress though, if I was to do this over again, I would have made these 1/2 inch. I would have tapped and died these as 1/2 inch to make them more heavy duty. I'll add 2 more here. I probably would have looked to see from a tubing perspective whether or not, instead of being 1/8 inch thick, I would have gone to say something like 3/16 inch thick, because you need this all to be very heavy duty in order to bend that steel cold. Other than that though, I think this is working, and it should serve me well for my needs. All right, guys, that's it. Listen, thanks for watching. I appreciate you joining, and if you have any questions or comments, please, I always appreciate hearing your comments. All right, take care, guys. Thanks.